So, Lorena, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I'm really excited to be here speaking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. When you reached out, I was excited to see what this was all about. So thanks.
I know, it's like, it was super random. But, one of the things, we were just talking off camera, one of the things that's been really interesting to me, both because of our work with a lot of restaurants and just because of myself personally, is food. And learning a little bit more about you and your experience with food, one thing that I was really excited about was your grandmother and her restaurant. When you look at her restaurant, is there a favorite dish or memory that you have?
It's interesting with my grandmothers. So this is my maternal grandmother, and I'll say this, both of my grandmothers were both larger than life women, that's probably where I get it from. But my maternal grandmother, she had a small restaurant. It was about maybe 15 seats. And, from that little restaurant, I think what was so really, I think something that really stuck to me is that she was able to do so much out of there. And she was just such an incredible chef. I mean, anything and everything she made was just like on the fly, from scratch, off the top of her head, amazing. Kind of thinking about my favorite dish that she would make, for me particularly, was actually, she would make milanesa.
Okay.
Which is really just a breaded, piece of meat is basically what it is. And the reality is that what I loved about it is that she would take the time to dry out the bread, make her own breadcrumbs. and the meat always came out tender. I don't know how she did it, but she just did it, and one of the memories I always have is that she'd tell me, I'd go and get it even out of the refrigerator, just cold. And she'd be like, that's not the way you eat, milanesa. You got to put it, put it back, put it in the oven, warm it up. And I was like, no, absolutely not. But what was so incredible about her, I think even more than the restaurant, was her entrepreneurial spirit. She was really the first entrepreneur I actually ever got to meet or work with, to be honest. And beyond, creating and building this restaurant, she actually had a small grocery store that she started, and she would get real creative, and she would have layaways for her, for her clients and things like that on certain Christmas items that they needed. She was just really creative, and she just came up with a lot of great ideas. And I think that more than just her creativity in the kitchen was being that business-minded woman, and to do that at that age, at that time in history, amazing. I think back of all the things that she put her hands on. That's kind of like, that's me. Give me another project, give me another new concept to work with. That's one of the things that I always loved about her.
Yeah, I think of women, especially in the past, in a time where there were even more obstacles to entry into entrepreneurship and high-level workforce opportunities. And funnily enough, one of them for me is my grandmother, who used to own this building. And she came here to the U.S. from Morocco at like 22 or something. And she had already had some kids. She had no husband, and just a tough lady. Entrepreneur, all the things you describe. So for me, I've been very fortunate to have powerful female role models in my life. My mom is definitely one of them for me. She used to teach karate. I know. So my dad didn't get with nothing. And for me, I feel like that's been a real privilege, because it's allowed me to, for me, my father is a seminal figure in my life, very important. But at the same time, having the ability to look at strong people from both genders and be like, this is what an elite participant looks like on both sides. For me, that's been extremely valuable. One question along those lines: why is it important to have role models who are accessible and who are similar to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, representation in that regard really boils down to creating a possibility. All of a sudden, it's possible. It's possible to be that chef, that owner. It's possible to be, that accountant, that CEO, if you wanted to.
Sure.
It's not only just the optics, but it's actually being able to see someone and say, they're doing it, I can do it too.
Right.
That's one part of it. I think the other part of it, and you just mentioned it, is being accessible, right? I think I've been really fortunate that here in Austin, so many entrepreneurs are so accessible. They make themselves accessible. You don't find that everywhere else. It's very unique to Austin, in my opinion. But, you go out and you see something or see someone doing something. And I know so many different chefs, owners, you name it. if I reach out to them and I talk to them, I say, hey, I've got some questions. Would you mind having a coffee with me?
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They'll sit down and chat with me and kind of go over things and kind of direct me or give me guidance or tell me, hey, these are the resources that are out there, which I really appreciate. So I think part of it is that, you have that, you really do have that possibility. All of a sudden they've opened a door. Someone has opened kind of like your eyes to saying, you can do this, number one. Number two is being able to actually have that conversation with someone that's going to give you that time and say, not only can you do that, but let me show you how you can. And that to me is really, really, really unique about Austin, about how we do business here.
Right.
So many entrepreneurs here, like I said, that are willing to do that for you.
Right. I've observed the exact same thing you have, and I think that's been one of one of the greatest reasons why I've been able to learn a lot very fast is I'm privileged. I think in the city we're privileged to have very accessible, smart people. And I also think the darndest thing is if you ask people for help, they will help a incredibly large percentage of the time, especially if you ask thoughtfully and intelligently.
Sure.
Like if you ask Warren Buffett to send you a check for $100 million, that ain't happening.
That's not going to happen.
You know what I mean? But if you ask someone like, hey, like I love this. Could I come bring you lunch and pick your brain for 20 minutes?
Sure.
Especially for someone who's busy, because you have to be respectful of their time. And the higher up on the totem pole you get, the smaller time increment you're asking for. But it's just like I've gotten an overwhelming amount of yeses from people who at times I've had just absolutely no business talking to. And you're like, how am I even here?
Absolutely. I know so many people that are out there that have helped me. I'll have a question about, hey, I've never packaged sauce before or salsa before. I need to know how to do this. And I'll find a friend or someone that in the business that's doing it, and I'll just reach out and say, I hope you don't mind, but I'd love to just have 5 minutes with you.
Sure.
This is my question. 9 times out of 10, they're saying yes. They're they're happy to help. They're happy to give you, again, resources, kind of direct you in the right area and tell you, hey, this is who you should talk to. This is how it worked for me. And if I can pay that forward, I'm happy to.
100%. And I think of all the people who who have spent time like that with me and who have invested that kind of time in me. And I made a post about this recently. I was like, I became a super fan of every single one of those people. I remember there's one woman who we're going to be interviewing in a month or so. Her name is Tamara Fields, and she is like the public service lead for Accenture in the U.S.
Nice.
And this is really funny, but the first time someone connected us, and the first time I ever called with her, she was like, she didn't hop on the call till like 8 minutes after it was scheduled to start. So I was like, okay, this is not a great sign. She hopped on the call. She started, the first thing she said, so why are we on this call again? I was like, oh my God, this lady has got a lot going on. And I'm not, so I was, but if you approach that humbly and you're like, this lady is running a publicly traded business and is doing crazy stuff, you're like, and I'm just a college kid. It's, you can't let your pride get in the way of the reality of the situation.
Sure.
And it was hilarious because while she was on the call, she was on another call. Like that was happening on like a thing next to her. And so I thought and I was like, I have no idea if this lady likes me. I don't know if this is going well. And we probably talked for a total about 8 minutes. But, immediately she was like, so we talked, she was like, oh, I like this kid. He's okay. She's like, okay, so how can I help? That was a question I was like, I had no idea how to answer that. But the fact that it was asked was something that was really powerful to me. Anyways, lady spent a cumulative total of 15 minutes sending emails, talking to me, whatever. Ever since then, I've told everybody that this lady's super cool.
Oh, that's
Anybody
awesome.
asks me, I'm just like, I greatly respect this woman. Hanging out with this woman made me realize how much of a gap, how many more skills I needed to build. And like, I think that it's very difficult to imagine how skilled the top executive decision makers are. And you're like, well, I could do that. And you're like, could you? I mean, because, in my youthful ignorance, youthful narcissism, you're kind of like, I can do whatever. And you're like, well, you got to build some skills before you can do whatever.
Sure.
And I think that, accessibility, something like that, meant a lot to me. You mentioned recently you spent a lot of time in San Antonio and that the food there is different than in Austin. I've been dying to ask this question because it's super interesting to me. How does the food in Austin differ from the food in San Antonio, Houston or Dallas or other parts of Texas?
Yeah, so Texas, I feel, is really unique when it comes to food because every city has their own attitude. The food has its own attitude, has its own tone. It has its own, obviously, flavors. But, if you think of Austin, Austin's always been kind of that experimental kind of place, right? Anything goes in Austin. I mean, you've got KG barbecue here. They're doing, Central Texas barbecue with an Egyptian, Middle Eastern flair.
Super
I mean,
creative.
anything's possible, and it's delicious. They make great food. You've got all sorts of really cool concepts going on in Austin, and it's very, very readily accepted.
Right.
Customers here are looking for that. They're open-minded to it. They love it. They're looking for that new thing. Where you have, do you think of Dallas? Dallas is polished. The food is refined, big, bold flavors, but it is all about refinement and presentation.
Right.
That's what you're going to find in Dallas. You go to Houston, you've got such diversity. It's literally a melting pot of different cultures in Houston, and that is reflective in their food. You see all sorts of different types of food over there that are just, you go back to the different types of cultures that are actually there in Houston, and you can find that in Houston.
Yeah.
San Antonio, I feel, is really kind of like that heritage kind of place where you have Tejano, you have really Tejano flavors. You've got Tex-Mex flavors, and that's really Tex-Mex. It's not. You don't find that type of Tex-Mex anywhere else in Texas. It's really just unique to San Antonio.
Right.
So you've got all these different types of foods, cuisines, and I firmly believe every city has kind of like their own food attitude. It's just accepted there in that city. So yeah.
One question which immediately jumped to mind off the back of that. First of all, that was a fabulous answer.
Oh, thanks.
I think it's. I had no idea how that question could possibly be answered simply and clearly, and yet it was. So I'm very impressed in that regard. If I'm to go to a new city, I was originally, for some reason, the Mexico City popped up in my mind, and then I realized you would actually be able to give me real recommendations because you lived there for a while, so that's not fair. But if I was to go to a new city and say I have no context whatsoever about the food, how should I go about discovering places to try?
Yeah, that's always that's interesting. So for me, I've lived in several different places. I've moved around a lot throughout my life, and the one thing is always, I go back to people. I have to talk, and I have to want to talk to a lot of the native people and just say, what are your favorites? Where do you go? And I don't want to. I'm not looking for the posh new places.
Right.
I'm actually looking for the old favorites because I feel like those old favorites really talk about the staple of what that city, that place is all about. You mentioned Mexico City, and I don't mind talking about it, right? I love Mexico City. You've got, so I lived in Mexico City before this whole culinary, explosion happened with all of these Michelin stars and, everything that's going on over there. So for me, as I go back to like the old school or old way of Mexico City, I think of places like Hacienda de los Morales. They've been around for a long, long time. It's steeped in tradition. It's old Mexican food. It's beautiful. It's a gorgeous hacienda that you go into. And then you think of like these other little taco places that I really liked. Like, there was one, I worked at the embassy, the U.S. Embassy for 6 years.
Shoot.
And right behind the embassy, there's a place that's called Los Camarones. I'm going to forget the name now, but it's a little taco place right behind. Everybody would go there, and you'd hear about it. And so, we'd finally go, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, it's all about, it's all about the beans that they're making and the fresh tacos that they're making, the fresh tortillas that they're making. You're like, oh, you see it, comes together. But it's those local places that really kind of speak to what the city's about, right? There's a lot of trendy new places you can try and things like that, which always fun. No offense, I love it, but it's those staples that you want to go to and to really understand what the city's all about when it comes to food.
Yeah, there are two experiences in my mind that impact the way I view eating during times of travel. One of them was in Rwanda, where there was this super delicious coffee there. A lot of times the coffee is also brewed with chocolate as well, this dark, deep chocolate, which gives it a super good flavor, which of course I drank far too much of. But there was one coffee shop that was about half a mile from where I was staying, and they also had, one of the wonderful things about Rwanda is their avocados are absolutely huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just, whereas in the United States, everything, they're like, we'll charge you extra for an avocado. They just throw additional avocados onto anything they give you. Like, here, we have some of this in the back. And so I would go to the same restaurant and order the same thing all the time just because it was, but I don't know, because it allowed me to feel like I just lived there. Like I was just like a regular person living there. And this is a non-event. I just exist in the city. I remember in Mexico, in a small town where I was staying with some friends, we were on the beach, like pretty close to the beach. And I get up early and was with a bunch of college kids who did not get up early. And so I was always hungry before everybody else. And I would walk down, and there was this lovely little restaurant that had like wood shack steps to get up to it. And it was very much like kind of out of a truck, and it was strange. But you could just see the water and the sand there. And I remember that because, it's not the most complicated dining when you're traveling. That's the most rewarding. It's something that really is imbued with what makes the place special. So that is to say, it's one's objective while traveling is not to eat the fancy new stuff. It's to eat the stuff that's representative of the place you're at.
Absolutely.
And that's
I think that's the fun thing. It's like going to New Orleans and, waking up on a Sunday morning and walking the market.
Right.
Sure, stop in, grab your coffee, grab your beignets, Café du Monde, and keep on walking down the street, and you walk right through the market, and you see all sorts of stuff happening, right? What the locals are really eating, what the locals are really buying. That's what's interesting to me. So,
right.
Yeah.
No, I super love that. Talking about you a little bit, one thing I know about you, having done my research, is you've spent a lot of time in your life working towards creating opportunity for other people. One of the specific areas where I've seen you do that is with young people. I've seen you, I know you've taught classes. I know you've engaged in mentorship and some other areas in philanthropy in that regard. Why is that an important item for you?
Yeah, for the basic reason is that, our youth is going to be, obviously our future, right? And if we don't invest the time, if we don't invest those resources in them, then later we can't be complaining about, what we're turning out, right? So for me, it's really important that if I would love for someone to open doors for me. Right. I would love to have someone open doors for me, as I have. I've had that happen. I've had people, mentors. I've had people help me up the ladder. For me, I don't want to pull the ladder up with me. I want to extend it. I want to make it a longer ladder for people to keep on coming up the ladder. I think that's really important. It's always been something that it's really, hospitality is not just about one person. It's about everyone. And as I've, having taught at the Art Institute, that's one of the things I would see all the time is that we'd have a lot of students come in and they're fresh and they're new and they're excited about our industry. They're really excited about getting involved. And the worst thing that can happen is that they get out there and, they're stifled with, I don't want to teach you. I don't want to help you. I don't want to open doors for you. We need to. We all need to open doors. We need to help. We need to train. We need to mentor. We need to coach. It's one of those things that we got to keep that excitement alive for those students, for the next generation. It's a hospitality in the restaurant industry is a really tough industry to be in. And the worst thing we can do is really make it harder for anyone to get into, open doors. Absolutely. Lend a hand. Absolutely. Have that conversation. Absolutely. Those are the things that need to happen. And for me, it's always been really important to continue to make our industry exciting for the youth that are coming up.
Yeah, well, I think it's an attitude that shows a long focus, because, and I think that's something that I try to do. I once made a unpopular argument that we didn't need less selfish people. We need, selfishness was not the problem. The problem was they weren't thinking with a view of the future. Because if you're really selfish, what you do is you invest heavily in your community and the quality of your life goes up 10x. Whereas if you grab all the resources for yourself and you never create any value, you live in a...
Who are you going to share that with?
No, I'm saying, you're like the King Midas over here.
Absolutely.
And so for me, I think that's been a pivotal mindset. It's like, no, I am self-interested. I want the best possible world for myself. That world includes a bunch of other people who are also high level. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. And I will say too, I am not yet at the age. Well, I'll say this. Even being very young and thus not having a lot of time to observe returns from investing in people who were coming up, I've still seen enough to be like, holy crap, this can be massive. I remember I had a very hard time when I was a young person. I did not do well in school. I did not enjoy myself. But the way I motivated myself was by saying, hey, now that I've gotten past this, I can use the information which I've gotten to inform other young people that it gets better. And here are the key ways that you can survive and make things get better. And if I can prevent just one of those people from enduring what I endured, I will have benefited tremendously. Some of these people now are going ahead to do tremendous things. Sure. And now the gratification of that is it's like it's like putting away money for retirement. It's like, all along the way, you're doing whatever in your own personal life, you get your own personal goals, but it's a continuously compounding bit of value every time you
absolutely
you do something kind for someone else.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that I think having been in that culinary school kind of environment, right, and seeing so many young students coming through, like I said, one thing that to me is really to see that light in their eyes and kind of like light up and be like, wow, this is such a fun thing to do. This is exciting, And I say that, and, I have a godson who is about to graduate from high school. And I know he's always dreaming of opening up a chocolate chip cookie company or cookie company.
Okay.
And, which I'm very excited for him. But I explained to him, I said, okay, but business comes first. You got to learn the business aspect, then we'll make cookies together for a lifetime, But I love to see how excited he is about it. I love to see that he's excited to learn, to do more, to try more. Even trying flavors of cookies makes him excited. And I think that's that excitement. If we can go ahead and bottle that and, push that forward, I think that's what we need to do.
I have a question which has jumped up to me off the back of that is, you're someone who has invested heavily in your education. You have an MBA. I feel like, would you tell an aspiring chef or an aspiring restaurateur that it's important for them to invest in their education just as much as it is in their craft?
100%. Yes. And education comes in many, many, many different forms. An MBA is not for everybody. I can say that right now. Culinary school is not for everybody, However, learning your foundations, whether it's in business or it's actually in cooking, right, that's important. And so, yes, I think really, really focusing and gaining as much education as you can, it's critical. It's important. As a business person, as a chef, as a manager, as an owner, you name it. It's something that's very, very important to do. And again, and I say this because, getting an MBA is not easy for some people. No. They don't have the time. They don't have the resources. They don't have, it's maybe not even what they want to do. But learning the foundation is very important. I have clients who are chefs who've maybe never gone to culinary school. And I encourage them to go and learn the foundations of cooking. So, and that's kind of a funny thing, right? Because you think, well, they're already chefs. And it's like, well, okay, but sometimes they've never learned the true foundations of cooking, how to truly build out and price out a recipe. How how do we actually go ahead and multiply that recipe by 100, whatever needs to happen, right? Sometimes they've never actually had that opportunity to do that, is to go out and actually teach themselves or learn, maybe in a formal setting of some sort, on how to do that. And so that's critical, because the idea is to be creative in this field, And if you have a good foundation, you're able to create whatever you'd like, right? It's you learn the bechamel sauce recipe, and then you get to make that into anything you want, including queso, So it's learning that, right? It's doing that and investing in yourself with that education.
One thing which I really appreciate about what you're saying is it reminds me of a tenet I hold very dear, and I feel like one thing that's always very important to me is picking up a first principles understanding of the world. The question is, right, if you were to take every idea or every component or whatever you're doing down to its basest form, and you understand that allows you to have this really powerful intuitive sense of what's going on. I would say a person who we were just talking about, who it sounds like really encapsulate those values, is your grandma, who can just kind of whip up stuff off the top of her head. And that shows a It's the difference between someone who's read everything in a textbook and is seeing and be like, I'm doing exactly as the textbook says, versus somebody who has really steeped in all of the knowledge. You have this kind of almost magical ability to create stuff on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just as prepared and just as trained as anything that you see from a more memorized approach. But I really appreciate that sentiment. And to me, that's been a vastly important resource. Pivoting a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously your grandmother is one of these people, but who are some of the women in food or in hospitality that you really admire the most?
There's so many, and I could probably sit here, for hours and
Name your favorite child.
And name, yeah, right, exactly. name so many, but there's always two that come to mind, and one of them is Tiffany Derry out of Dallas.
Okay.
She was on Top Chef. She has a huge, business now that she's built herself, and I admire her for so many different reasons. I remember when I started my social media platform, Dishing Dames. She had just come off the show, and she started I think she had just opened her place at Food Legacy Food Hall over in Dallas, and it's Roots Chicken. And I remember I reached out to her. I thought, she's never going to say yes to me. I mean, here's a celebrity. She's too busy. And she said, "Yeah, come on out. I'd love for you to come over and interview me. Learn about my business." And that was many years ago. And so even now, when I see her, we chat, we talk, and I love this. But what I admire so much about her is that she has grown her business in so many different ways. She has an event now that's called Chef, with a SHEF.
Okay.
Chef. She's got an event that she's doing now, which is amazing. She has, she started a franchise of her Roots Chicken. She has a fine dining restaurant as well. She's on, Master Chef now. She's been on Top Chef. I mean, you name it, she's done it all. And at the same time, I love running into her because and talking to her. She's down to earth, and she's like, "Hey, Lorena, how you doing? What's going on?" Yeah, what's happening. But she's such an intelligent, kind, and smart woman. She's kind of had a vision for herself, right? And I think she's built that vision. She's brought it to life for herself. Right. The other one is actually June Rodil from Houston.
Okay.
And she has the Good Night Hospitality Company, I believe it's called. Again, she's a master sommelier. Here's this woman that's master sommelier. She's developed several different concepts. She's incredibly, attuned to what's going on in the hospitality world. And her concepts are just so unique and so beautiful. And I love the vision that she always brings to what she does. And I don't know her. I've only met her, a couple of different times, and I don't know, as well as I do Tiffany. But it's one of those things where I admire the work that she's done, the concepts that she's built,
right.
The thoughtfulness that she puts into her brand and her concepts that she's creating. It's really neat to see, another female out there doing something like this and saying, okay, I too can have these thoughtful, beautiful concepts and bring them together. It's really neat to see these two women do that. And again, two out of like hundreds that I could probably mention.
Right. Yeah, it's an impossible question, but at the same time, I was excited to hear what you would pick because it's those questions are always hard. As kids, the little boys will ask each other, "Who's your favorite baseball player?" And you go through a massive list, and it's kind of like that. When did you realize that there was a real gap in representation for women in food?
It's kind of funny because it's one of the reasons I actually started Dishing Dames. When I was actually teaching at the culinary at the Art Institute, I was looking for females to highlight to my students. We talked about all sorts of male chefs, and these are master chefs, and these are restaurateurs. And I thought, I know so many women in here in Austin that I could highlight. And I remember, I went online and I was like, okay, top female chefs in Austin. And I think 2 people popped up, and I thought, this cannot be happening. Yeah. This cannot happen. I mean, seriously, there's so many talented women just in Austin. And I thought, well, what about Texas? And same thing. I think like 4 people popped up, and I thought, 4 women, that's insane to me, But it really opened my eyes to the fact that there was such a huge gap. You have so many incredibly talented women doing such incredible things, whether it's creating concepts like Tracy Vaught over at the H-Town Group, Or, you have females that are cooking up a storm and making incredible dishes like Sonia Cote from Eden East, these talented women, right, that are out there doing this stuff. And I couldn't find anybody out there anywhere online to say, hey, this is who they are. And that's actually where I started Dishing Dames. I thought, there needs to be a platform.
Right.
There needs to be someone that's kind of just highlighting women, just showcasing these women who are doing phenomenal things, in our field. And so I went through this and I talked about it over and over again. And I always laugh because I do have two sisters. One's an attorney, one's a therapist.
Oh gosh.
And so it's kind of like the devil and the angel. And I remember the attorney was like, you should do it. Just do it. And I was like, oh, should I do this? And the other one, the therapist, was like, well, think about it, process through it. I don't know, is this really what you want to do? And I was like, okay. But that was really the first time I really noticed it. I think you kind of live. I lived, I think, maybe almost a sheltered life in knowing like, oh, yeah, of course. I grew up with a lot of very strong women in my life. My grandmother being one of them. Like I mentioned, my mom, my aunts, they're all the same. And so to me, it just comes naturally, right? Doesn't everybody do this? No, right? And so when I saw that, I just thought, okay, well, maybe it's time to just do something about it. So hence started Dishing Dames.
100%.
So.
Well, and Dishing Dames is obviously a major contribution to recognizing female efforts in food here in Texas. But that's just the one that's most obvious of how you've done that. Hearing how you've talked about mentorship and building connections and some of the other clients and people who you work with on a day-to-day basis, there are a lot of women who have benefited and who you're working to help tell their story and support them in their growth, in addition to just that one initiative. What are some of the other major challenges in hospitality that you're kind of concerned about today?
Yeah, I think the other things that exist out there and that people don't really understand or maybe see sometimes is that, number one, I'll say this, burnout really exists. There's just... This is a relentless type of industry. And so if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not, making time for yourself, that burnout comes quickly.
Right.
That's something to really consider. Right now, I think the industry, we've always suffered with workforce, trying to find workforce solutions. But now I feel like it's harder now than ever, as far as retention, employee retention, keeping, good employees in place, trying to, making sure that they're trained, making sure that they're enjoying their work. Those are the things that are really, I think that are out there people don't really see often. The other thing I'll say is this, having operational discipline, right? And I say this because too often someone opens a restaurant in the first 3 years, it's going pretty well. You're still the fresh new thing. You're bringing in sales. Year 3 hits, and all of a sudden it's kind of like you're no longer the fresh new thing, right? Now, in the first 3 years, if you did not put systems in place, if you did not build a strong structure for your business, financial structure, whether it's, doing inventories, keeping your P&Ls, making sure that you understand what food cost is.
Right.
Year 3 hits, and then all of a sudden you're struggling. All of a sudden it's like, wait, we're not the fresh new company anymore. Now we're struggling, and now all of a sudden food cost makes a difference. Right. And you never costed out your menu. And, because you were just doing so great. So operational discipline is so important. And I think a lot of people don't understand as owners and operators that they need to have that discipline in place, put systems in place, have structure. Those are the things that I think that are real concerns that I see as a consultant. Like I said, burnout, employee turnover. And then the other thing is really just having operational discipline.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a great segue in my mind, because my next question was, what are some of the challenges that you focus on helping clients overcome in your business? And I imagine that exactly that is what you're talking about. So, are there any other key challenges that you're seeing with your clients that really you're focused on helping them with? Or I guess, because I don't know 100%, I don't understand your business fully, is there a typical solution that you're providing for these clients, or is it different for each person?
Yeah, actually it's different for each person.
Right.
I think the overall concept really is helping, whether it's chefs, owners, or operators, kind of bring a vision, to life, right? That's part of it. but bringing that vision to life with systems in place,
Right.
and being able to put those systems in place.
Right.
And sometimes that's really hard. I've had clients that, they're owners and they have a vision for their business or their restaurant, and they really want just that vision regardless of what the cost is. Some people have, deep pockets, and that's lovely. That's lovely. And you can make that work for deep pockets. Sometimes, though, 9 times out of 10, you're not that person with deep pockets.
Right.
And, it's hard to kind of bring that vision to life. And we have to talk about budgets and all the boring things that come with it. Oh, we have to hit a budget. We have to do food costs. We have to do labor costs. What are operational costs and things like that. So that's kind of where I come in. It's kind of like bringing all that chaos and say, okay, let's kind of tone down the chaos and let's figure out what it is. How do we make this successful? How do we make this feasible for you?
Yeah. Well, one thing for me that makes a lot of sense is it's very difficult to supply the talent and the thirst for innovation that's coming from some of these chefs or these super intelligent, super excited people, because it's that atmosphere and that supercharge and their motivation to commit to a single concept that makes the business work. But at the same time, you're coming in and you're talking to them and you've seen 100 concepts relatively similar, for better or worse, to that one. And so this would be the 10,000th time you've gone through a P&L. And as a result, it makes a lot of sense why that support would be really valuable to your clients, because you've seen a lot of volume. And
Right.
that's what you want. You want someone who's seen the sorts of ups and downs that will come. Someone who's been an expert in creating those systems. So it makes a lot of sense. How do you get new business?
Word of mouth, to be honest.
Right.
At this point now, it's really word of mouth. It's, friends, from a reference or a referral or things like that. Oftentimes I'll get called and just, hey, Lorena, I know you've been doing this. We met, at this event, or we did, I met you through so-and-so. I'd love for you to have, come. And it always starts kind of like with a cup of coffee. Come over, have a cup of coffee with me,
100%.
come see my concept. I'd love for you to see what this is about. But yeah, word of mouth. I think, networking is so important. This is where you build, community. This is where you build friendships. This is where you find, new clients, is really through networking and being engaged with the local community.
How have you built a strong reputation for yourself and your personal brand in your community?
You do what you say you're going to do. I mean, there's nothing else to it, but you do what you say you're going to do, right? And sometimes it's hard. It's difficult. Like I said, sometimes chefs don't like talking numbers. They're like, hey, I want to create a new recipe. It's like, well, let's put some numbers to that. But honestly, it's really just walking the line and saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how we're going to get it done, and following through and getting it done. I mean, that's kind of where you build that reputation.
Yeah, and I think it's setting and then meeting expectations over time is what causes people to trust you. They trust, hey, I said I was going to do this, it happened. And it's, there's a desire to have some sort of sexy answer, which is like, you can do it with this quick hack.
Oh, right.
And really, the truth is, do it and then do it again and do it again, do it again for 10 years and then 20 years, etc. And it compounds. And that's one of the reasons I asked that question about how you build trust, how you've built your book of clients, is because it's really fascinating. A lot of times, if you do nothing other than do a really good job every time you get an opportunity, you get more calls.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
I feel that's powerful.
It's consistency. It's being consistent all the time, right? It's being able to deliver consistently. So yeah,
100%. For anybody who's interested in learning more about you and your work, what's a good place for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. They can reach out to me in many different ways. Let's say this: if they're on social media and they want to reach out to me on Dishing Dames, send me a DM, not a problem. If they'd like to reach out to me via Upstart Hospitality, you can go online and just reach out to me. And honestly, if they just wanted to email me in info@upstarthospitality, that works as well.
I love that. I have one final question for you. This one's hard. If you were to write a book about food, what would that book be about?
Oh wow, that's a good question. Honestly, I'm obsessed with the recipes that my mom and I do together. It's something that every chance I get to cook with her, I want to. It's something that, we've built all sorts of really cool recipes. There's one recipe that I love doing with her. We do it during Lent, so it's going to be about that time. Right. And it's kind of like a bread pudding, that my grandmother used to do with her. And, she and I now have perfected this new kind of our recipe. So if I could write a book like this, and just fill it with all of those recipes that she and I have worked on together, I would love to do that. That'd probably be the book I'd write.
If that bread pudding recipe is in it, then you can put me down for a copy, because it's a favorite in the Evans household. We'd be super interested in it. Lorena, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.